Hey, welcome to Tape, powered by Ram, back-to-back winner of Motor Trend's Truck of the Year. I'm Ryan Dixon. I'm a writer for Sportsnet.ca. Joining me on this awesome Stanley Cup final podcast, we have Sportsnet NHL editor Rory Boylan and also Sportsnet NHL writer Luke Fox. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Great. Hey, you know what, Ryan? So far, this final has gone according to our predictions, right? If it wraps up on Saturday,
That's
I think we
right.
both predict 5-game wins for the Tampa Bay Lightning. How are your predictions holding up, Luke?
Well, I picked the Dallas Stars to win the Cup way back in last September.
Ooh.
So the fact that I even have my team in the final feels good. Although the way the last couple games have gone, I'm not too confident. Tampa looks pretty dominant.
Well, let's jump in right there then. I mean, Dallas did shoot itself in the foot right off the hop in Game 3. We're recording this Thursday morning as the Lightning have taken a 2-1 lead, and we'll, of course, get to Steven Stamkos and his amazing Stanley Cup final shooting percentage here. But the Stars were known. They built their bones on defensive hockey. And, you know, when Miro Heiskanen's giving the puck away and Kucherov's going in and staking Tampa to a 1-0 lead early, you know it might be a long night. The offense has been the struggle all year, and at times it's looked like they've solved that, but now they're back to really looking for goals. Luke, through 3 games, what do you think Dallas can do to get this thing back on the rails, if that's a possibility at all?
Oh, it's a possibility. You don't want to rule them out. They're only down 2-1, but the big line needs to get going. You look at the scoring from Dallas, and it's being led all postseason by the defensemen, by Heiskanen and John Klingberg. And the big guys who are getting the big bucks, that top line needs to get going because Tampa's top line has been fantastic. Tampa's Stars are putting up numbers on the board. And I think that falls on Radulov and Ben and Tyler Seguin in particular. Now I know he's probably nursing something. There's speculation that it's a hand or wrist or something like that because he's taking less faceoffs. But the guy only has 2 playoff goals, and they need more from him. And if it's not him, then they have to do it by committee. I think scoring first is really important to the Dallas Stars' success because once they start chasing the game, Tampa seems to feast on more open play. So I think if Dallas can score first, they can lock it down and hopefully win like a kind of a greasy 2-1 or 3-2 game.
We have seen stretches in these playoffs where Dallas's offense was going, and that top line was part of it. Against Calgary, they scored a bunch. They kept pace with Colorado. I think they were outscored by 1 in the series, but came away with the win. How much, Luke, do you think that was them actually finding some scoring and being able to play that way versus, the situation? Like against Calgary, they were up against Cam Talbot. Against Colorado, they were facing third string goalie. They were getting pretty thin there. And now against Tampa, tough defense. Andrei Vasilevsky's an elite goalie. Is this really who Dallas is, or do you think what we saw from their offense against Colorado and Calgary is something they can get back in this final series?
I wouldn't think to that extent, just because, like you said, Vasilevsky is, one of the best goalies in the whole world. It's routine almost that he's up for the Vezina. And I think his story is almost, in a strange way, kind of flown under the radar because Hedman's been so good, and him getting his 10th goal, something only Brian Leetch and Paul Coffey have done in the history of the game, has taken the headlines. Kucherov and Point have been so good, and the Stamkos story. Vasilevsky's dominance is kind of flown under the radar. Tampa's the only team that made it, deep in the playoffs without having to go to a second goalie. Like Curtis McElhinney hasn't even had to take the crease. So I think that's part of it. And I think it's also Tampa throughout this postseason is used to playing a more defensive game than they had in previous years. They've gone through what John Cooper said were the defensive juggernauts of the league. Now they're kind of comfortable in locking things down a little bit and grinding out lots of overtime wins. You go through Columbus and Boston, teams like that, and the Islanders, it kind of prepares you for Dallas, because Dallas is a little bit like the Islanders of the West in terms of rolling all four lines, doesn't want to get in a track meet. So Tampa has kind of, their path to get here has prepared them, I think, very well for the Stars.
All right, I got to pick up on a few Tampa things, but we have to start with Stamkos. I mean, obviously, it's not a complete Hollywood ending given he only played 2 more shifts after scoring the goal. And I mean, I think there's a pretty strong sense, especially with back-to-back games coming. Man, I don't know how Tampa can put him back in the lineup without knowing for sure that he could play the whole game, and that spot is just too precious. Setting all that aside, what's going through your mind just from a writing storyline perspective when you see this guy streak down the right side and bury one past Khudobin?
Yeah, it's kind of out of Hollywood, right? Like I imagine, 50 years from now when people talk about this final, he won't have scored early in game 3. It will have been the triple overtime winner in game 7 or something.
Yeah.
Like this kind of has like one of those legends written all over it. The guy's out 210 days since he last played a game, and the shot was something, but also how he avoided, I think it was Esa Lindell, how he dodged that check along the boards. He could have got crunched and just kind of skirted that, steps in and makes no mistake. And the fact that I think the puck was only on his stick for a grand total of 7 seconds the whole game. He only played like 247 and to make an impact. I think it's just a great story. And if they do get these 2 last wins, the cup is going into his hands first, right, as the captain, and he will have felt, hey, I wasn't just hanging around the bubble and being there for moral support. I actually have my name on the box score. I actually made an impact in a cup final.
Okay, so if the cup is going to Stamkos's hands, then where's the Conn Smythe going? Is it still Hedman? Have Point and Kucherov really entered this race? What do you think?
I would think Hedman. I would think Hedman, but I think you could build a case for Point. You could build a case for Kucherov. You could build a case for Vasilevsky. But I just think what Hedman has done in terms of the ice time he's logged, the way he kind of controls the game, all situations, defends in addition to the 10 goals, I think it's probably Hedman's. It kind of reminds me of, with the last time Tampa was in the final in 2015 and they lost to Chicago. You can make a case for a lot of the forwards on that dynamic Blackhawks team, but Duncan Keith was kind of just having this otherworldly performance, and I think Hedman kind of falls into that category.
So Luke, if Tampa Bay goes on and wins the Stanley Cup here, every year, whoever wins the Stanley Cup, there's always some kind of thing you want to draw out. Like, what can other teams learn about this year's champion that they maybe will copycat? What is it for the Lightning? Yeah, last week on this show we talked about, maybe it's just staying the course with your core of stars that you buy, that you think eventually are going to break through if you just can nibble around the edges and support them in the ways you can. But is it that? Is it something stylistic? What is going to be the takeaway that other teams are going to have if Tampa Bay wins this year?
For me, it's the depth and the willingness to invest in the right depth pieces. It started with bringing on Patrick Maroon, Blake Coleman, Zach Bogosian, Barclay Goodrow. Those guys didn't come. Some of them came fairly cheap, but some of them, they paid quite a price, whether it's draft picks or outbidding the competition. Kevin Shattenkirk, like, you think they have enough guys, but they went and got more guys. And just kind of a reminder that this is a war of attrition and you need more people. The fact that they were able to make it this far with an injured Stamkos, I think is a testament to that depth. Yes, of course, Kucherov and Point led the way and Hedman, but they're not on the ice all the time. and they got key contributions up and down the lineup. And the type of players that they added are kind of a little bit more gritty, you know, and I think it kind of shows you can't just, your third and fourth lines can't be an afterthought. Your third defensive pairing can't be an afterthought. You have to pick the right people for those spots, and it may cost you. That for me is kind of the takeaway. They were already a great team, already an exciting team, but they weren't satisfied with that. We need to adjust. And kind of Brisebois kind of put the cherry on top of this wonderful cake that Stevie Yzerman built.
So, I mean, you mentioned the war of attrition. It's especially true, it feels like, this year and through the first two games where it's been so physical. Have you been surprised by how physical it is? And do you think they can keep it up with back-to-back games on the horizon here?
The back-to-back is really fascinating for me. And the fact that if Tampa wins tomorrow, you could have a Stanley Cup clinching game be the second half of a back-to-back. I don't like it personally. I get why they're doing it. They want a Saturday night game for TV. They don't want to go Sunday and go up against the NFL. There's also the fact that the players want to get the heck out of that bubble as fast as possible. But it is kind of a little bit odd to me. I would rather them take their time and have potential clinching games not be on back-to-backs, just so that the product, the level of play is at its highest. But I do like how much hits and how much nastiness is in this. And I wonder if part of that is the product of being stuck in this bubble. Like, if we're going to be here for 4 rounds, we might as well like fight and claw and scratch and do everything we can to make it worth our while. Like we talk about, you know, what a triumph overcoming this COVID Cup will be for the winners, but think about the runner-up. You spent just as much time in these conditions as the winners, and you have nothing to show for it.
This might be the toughest Stanley Cup final to lose.
Yeah.
I'm including Marian Hossa, thinking back to the devastating losses he had in the Cup final. This might be the hardest Cup final for anybody to ever lose. Luke, just want to bring it back to Dallas for one question, and Anton Khudobin specifically. Mm-hmm. He's going to need a new contract. He's set up to be a UFA. And I think we can all agree before this run, he was highly regarded as one of, if not the best backups in the league, was splitting time for the last 2 years with Ben Bishop. And he's just been ridden through this whole run for them now, and is probably going to be used on those back-to-backs. And that's likely why they didn't put him back out there for the third period in game 3. Has your opinion on him changed at all to the degree that, you know, could he be more than a tandem or a backup guy now? Could he be a starter potentially somewhere next year, maybe even in Dallas?
Not for me. I mean, what he's done is very impressive, and he's a lovable guy. Like, I love that image of him screaming, "We are not going home." I mean, this guy's a character, and he's played out of his mind. For me, he needs to be part of a tandem. And I think we, even in game 3, we saw a little bit of fatigue there. And also, I just think in general, we're going to see a lot of tandems, and we're going to need to see a lot of tandems in 2021, because it'll probably be a truncated schedule, tons of back-to-backs. It's going to be a sprint. I mean, they're talking that they won't even start to maybe mid-January, and that might be best case scenario. So I see him as a really good 1A, 1B type of guy, not a pure starter. And that's not a slight to him, because I don't think there are 30 true number ones to go, or 32 eventually true number ones to go around. I just think with his age, he can't be that guy. He can be a really good number 2 on a contender, or a number 1 on a bad team, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a slight to anybody. Like
No.
Tuukka Rask is basically a split starter guy now, and he's a Vezina candidate most of the time. And that's just the way the league seems to be going. We'll get you out on this one, Luke. So series is 2-1 for Tampa. Like you said, you had picked Dallas at the start of the season, preseason, to win the Stanley Cup. How do you predict the rest of the series is going to unfold?
It definitely feels like it's going Tampa's way. Just the way they've played the last 2 games. But Dallas, you look back at their previous series, they've been down before. They don't go out without a fight. So I do think they stretch it to at least 6 and maybe 7. I don't think we've seen the last of it. What I'm really curious about is how Dallas handles the goaltending for the back-to-back. I think Vasilevsky is, they're just going to ride him till the wheels fall off. He seems fine. He's still making saves. But I think Dallas, it'll be intriguing if Ben Bishop, goes in. Last time it was an absolute disaster. And right now he's officially unfit to play. But you got to think, how would Khudobin, fare playing 2 games in 48 hours after all the hockey he's played right now, which is the most of his life. So I think that's going to be kind of one of the more interesting storylines. And the other one is, do we see Stammer again?
Yeah. Boy, how hard would it be to go away from Khudobin for the second half of that back-to-back if the cup's on the line? You're down 3-1.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
So maybe you make the switch for Friday night, because like you said, it would be really hard for game 5. Yeah.
All of them are must-win, basically.
Yeah, they're all, well, they are.
Yeah, anywhere you go.
Yeah, it should be a harrowing 48 hours Friday, Saturday, back-to-back game 4 and 5. So enjoy, gentlemen. Luke, thanks so much for joining us and giving us your thoughts on this very unique final.
Yeah, we're finally here, the end of the longest season ever.
It's a marathon.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Luke.
Take care, guys.
All right.
See ya.
Talk to you. All right. That is Sportsnet's Luke Fox giving us his insight on a Stanley Cup final now led 2-1 by Tampa Bay. We'll see if the Bolts can close it out in a fury here on Friday and Saturday. All right, Rory, coming up, we're going to talk about some news and notes from around the NHL. It's not just what's happening in the bubble. Lots going on outside as well, and we want to touch on a few things, including the last Stanley Cup champion, the St. Louis Blues. Can they not find a way to make a deal with their pending UFA of a captain and franchise icon, Alex Pietrangelo? We will see. We'll talk about that after the break on Tape to Tape. Hey, welcome back to Tape to Tape. Don't forget to sign up for Sportsnet's Fantasy Hockey Playoff Pool presented by RAM. Just go to sportsnet.ca/RAM for your chance to win up to $50,000 in cash prizes and the grand prize, a 2020 RAM 1500 or RAM 2500. Sportsnet.ca/RAM. All right, Rory, let's jump way ahead. Of course, with the commissioner talking at the Stanley Cup final, lots of questions about what's next in terms of the 2020-2021 season. That's a mouthful.
I was going to say, yeah.
It's a mouthful, and there is a lot to chew on there. We obviously don't know. We're going to continue to be in a world where we don't know a lot. If I just asked you what you hope happens, what would you lay out?
What I hope happens, honestly, is that we return in January and we can have fans safely in the arenas, right? I don't know how realistic that's going to be, and I don't think anybody knows at this point. The next couple of months are going to determine that. Realistically, I think, if we can return sometime in January, and even if it's to empty arenas, maybe fans can start slowly coming back in month 2 or 3, and hopefully again by the end of the season, by the playoffs, we're either full capacity or 50% or more. Again, it's just really hard. It's impossible to even imagine what that situation is going to look like. You're starting to get some fans in certain NFL stadiums, but those are outdoors, right? And a lot bigger too. Yeah. So it's a little bit easier to get around that. Tougher for the NHL, but it's a gate league. So much of the revenues is dependent on that. So it is important. I don't want them to rush it. I don't think we're coming back December 1st as was originally outlined. I think the most likely thing is, you get training camps maybe in late December, maybe even not until early January. And then the season starts late January, maybe first thing in February, and we go. I don't see how it's possible, though, that you start that late have a full 82 game season that the NHL still says is desirable, and not have this go into the summer, which again, Bettman said at that avail isn't something he wanted to keep doing. You don't want playoff hockey in August and September. Certainly you want to try and get back to a normal October to June, or maybe this thing turns into a November to June permanent regular schedule as soon as you can. So ideally for me, the best case, we're back in January. We play a shortened season. The last time we started a season in January was 2013 after a lockout. That was a 48-game season in full playoff. I think we'll end up with a season a little bit longer than that. I think I think there are ways you could accomplish it, which is, one is maybe they could set up the schedule to be more like baseball, where you go in and play a series against a team. You play, Toronto goes to Vancouver and plays 2 or 3 games against the Canucks, or however it's going to work out. And then Vancouver comes and does the same thing. Maybe that's not the best example, but you know what I mean. You're playing series, so you can get more games in that way. So maybe we can reach 60 games or something like that. And then you come back and you have a full 4-round playoff. I don't see how it's possible to do all this and have an expanded playoff like we saw this year. I don't think that's in the cards. So if just we can get back to something in between 48 and 60 games, 4 rounds, best of 7 playoffs, and we get fans in the building again, I think that's the best case scenario, and I think we're all hopeful for that.
So it seems at the very least that Alex Pietrangelo will go to the open market as a right shot, fantastic defenseman who's already just had a wonderful career. That doesn't mean he won't ultimately be back in St. Louis, but what's your sense right now of where those two sit? Because we do hear reports that they might not even really be that close on a number.
No, it doesn't sound like they're close at all. And it sounds like it's not even just one thing that they're not close on. The report is that the Blues offered him an 8-year deal, which is longer than anybody else is going to be able to offer him, with an $8 million AAV, which is, again, market value for this time, especially. Who knows what anybody's going to get on the free agent market. But the sticking points appear to be no trade clause, which would be ideal for him. No signing bonus, which the Blues don't generally give out. They've acquired players that have had signing bonuses, but they don't generally sign guys to that, which, again, you go in the open market and you get some of those big money teams coming at you. A team like Toronto certainly would be one that's chasing Pietrangelo. They could, and have done many times before, given huge signing bonuses out. So every July 1, Pietrangelo could get a massive payday, and then the rest of the season he's getting paid, $700,000 or whatever the salary ends up being. Those are big sticking points that he could get absolutely somewhere else. It's just a matter of how important is that 8th year to him, and how much does the price get driven up by having to go back to 7 years and get 7 years from somebody else. So I think at this point, I would be surprised if he didn't get to October 9th unsigned and is testing that free agent market. It's still a possibility he gets that far and ends up back in St. Louis, right? Like, he's been comfortable there. He's a legend there, could have a statue one day, led them to a Stanley Cup as captain and all that stuff. But it's a business, and we're being reminded of it again here. So there are going to be a number of teams that are going to want to go at Pietrangelo. We can talk all we want about what are Hall and Pietrangelo going to get? What are any of these UFAs going to be able to get? How many of them are going to get short-term deals or be open to that, with the cap being so flat and teams just having less wiggle room than ever? But I think it's probably likely that the biggest guys, the Pietrangelos and Halls, that they probably still are going to get big money, $8 million or more from somebody, whether it's for 1 year, the full 7-year term, however it ends up going. You're going to figure it out. If a team wants these guys, they'll move something else to make it work. It's going to be fantastic if he gets there, because that's the theater we want, right? We want to see who's courting this guy and who's out there. There's a number of teams in the newsletter today. I wrote, Toronto is the obvious one. Vegas seems to be a team that is in on everybody and will just figure out a way to make it work. And the Calgary Flames are kind of sitting there as a bit of an interesting one for me too, because they actually have cap room. They have about $16 million in cap space. They've got a couple of RFAs to figure out and maybe some of their own UFAs, but they've got a bit of a defense to rebuild there. They've got 4 guys under contract, so it's not like they're devoid of anything. But I think the biggest reason that they might be interested in Pietrangelo is that Mark Giordano's got 2 years left on his contract. He's going to be 37 years old in October. So, time is running thin there. And if you can kind of bridge that by bringing in Pietrangelo and know that you're going to have that number one defenseman for the foreseeable future, and it's not going to run out on you when Giordano retires, then you're probably in a pretty good space. And I think we are all expecting Calgary to do something big. Johnny Gaudreau's name is the lead item on trade talks, but I don't think it ends there. I think they and their bold GM, Brad Shaliving, will be in the market for absolutely anything.
So I don't know if he quite qualifies as for franchise icon status, but Craig Anderson has been told the Sens won't bring him back. In this world of goalies splitting time, I do think there's someone out there who probably thinks he can play 25 to 30 games on the right team, but just want to take a minute to acknowledge what that guy's meant to that team in the past decade. I mean, ever since he arrived there in 2011-12, I mean, that team was on nobody's radar, and him and young Erik Karlsson just willed them into the playoffs. He was unbelievable. Of course, coming within a win of going to the final in 2017. He was fourth in Vezina voting one time. I mean, it's been almost 10 years there for Anderson, and he's been everything the Sens could have ever hoped for.
I mean, he stabilized everything for them. They needed somebody to just kind of calm it down. And I don't think it was obvious that he was going to be the guy long-term to fix that. And he ended up being that. He was great in the community. The community loved him and his wife. Really came together, really tight knit. It would be hard for him, I imagine, to leave and join some other team, but he'll want a Stanley Cup again too. Like he'll want to take that run, and maybe there is a team out there. He'll definitely have to accept something less. Like you're looking at 25, 30 games somewhere else, and maybe there is someone, but at the same time, his play is kind of falling off a little bit. He's in his late 30s. He's near the end of his career. So the best days, obviously, of Craig Anderson are behind you. But you could do worse than a guy like that who is going to give you good stretches. I mean, if Mike Smith is pulling in the duty that he was in Edmonton last year, I think there's going to be some market, however small it's going to be, for a guy like Craig Anderson, because he'll bring that veteran leadership. He'll give you good enough starts in what he needs to play. And if something happens to the other guy that you have, he'll be all right for you to fill in while an injury is being dealt with. So just a phenomenal career, though. Just found an absolute home there in Ottawa, and it really is the end of an era for him as they try to move anyway into the next stage of that rebuild.
Well, buddy, the next time we talk, we will have a Stanley Cup winner. Do you think this thing gets pushed past the weekend, or is Tampa going to close it out?
No, I don't. I'm going to stick to the original prediction of last week that this thing goes 5 games. I think, Dallas won game 1 because Tampa was gassed. They were in there on short rest, 1 day off, and Dallas had, I think, 4. And that's exactly how Tampa Bay got the decisive game 1 win against the New York Islanders in the Eastern Conference Final. And ever since then, we've started to see Dallas kind of be dominant, right? Like they've taken it to Dallas more often than not. They've controlled the shots. And they just seem to be maybe a bit more rested at this point. They've gotten here quicker in fewer games than the Dallas Stars have. So if Dallas can't keep the scoring pace as they were against those other teams that they maybe matched up better against, I just don't see a path. I think Tampa Bay has taken this thing over, and there's no looking back.
All right. Well, we will see how it shakes out. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks to our producers, Mike Tassoni and Michael Mares. Thanks, as always, to my co-host Rory Borland, and of course to Sportsnet's Luke Fox. Check back real soon for more glass rattling hockey action on Tape to Tape.